So we have malnourishment, we have inability to sleep, we have psychological, this is essentially psychological and emotional abuse. Um, I would, if you brought a child with that environment to me, that they're losing weight, they're wetting themselves, they're not getting enough nutrition, they're not able to sleep, I would absolutely recommend that they be removed from the home and I would contact CPS. And the only difference here is apparently CPS doesn't have jurisdiction over these children.
Hello, fellow nerds. Welcome to another episode of The Present Illness, the podcast where two physicians try to make sense of a world that's a little febrile and definitely underdiagnosed. I'm Alyssa Burgart, an anesthesiologist and bioethicist who tracks news and health law like they're EKGs, full of spikes and surprises. You may notice that Arghavan Salles, your favorite surgeon scientist and doom scroller in residence, is on vacation this week. The Present Illness is where we dig into public health, politics, culture, and ethics with a scalpel in one hand and a meme in the other. Big thanks to everyone listening, extra love to our subscribers, and welcome to anyone who is just finding us today. We're so glad you're here. As a note to new listeners, we often talk about topics that can be intense and can be a little difficult to hear. You might not want to listen to this with little ones in the car. This week, because Arghavan is on vacation, which she definitely needs, I wanted to have a guest on the show today, and so I am incredibly thrilled to have Dr. Lara Jones, a clinical assistant professor of pediatrics, double board certified in pediatrics and pediatric critical care, who practices in San Francisco. Um, she's here to talk about the incredible work that she's been doing advocating for children who are in ICE detention facilities. And we talked about her and her colleagues on a previous episode, and I'll link to those in the show notes. And unfortunately, as we've talked about on the show before, there are so many children who have been taken into ICE custody. They're being separated from their families, and we know that immense harm is being done to these kids. And so I'm incredibly thrilled to have Dr. Jones here to really help all of you understand a little bit more about what's happening in these detention facilities, and most importantly, what are things that you can do to try to get these kids safely out of these detention facilities. Dr. Jones, welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. It's such an honor.
I mean, I feel the same. Um, Lara, tell me a little bit about, so for folks who don't recall from an earlier episode, I have the pleasure of knowing you in real life. Like you were a critical care fellow while I was an attending at the same hospital, and so I've had the pleasure of getting to know you through the thick and thin of your training. And when I came across an article in the 19th, which is a news organization that I follow, and it said, pediatricians demand that these kids get out of detention facilities. And I started reading it, and I was on the couch with my family, and I was like, I know her. I know her. And that's when I reached out to you on Instagram to really send my thanks to you. So I'm so grateful for the work that you've been doing, and I can't wait to hear more about what led you to this work.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's been an incredible journey. It really, I mean, it started with one moment. I actually, don't have a history of doing advocacy work. I was very newly online as a physician, just starting to dabble in education and just advocating for, general safety of children and their well-being as a pediatric critical care doctor. And it was truly just like one moment that I saw that photograph of that boy, Liam, and I was completely beside myself. As a mother, I was gutted. He looked pale. He looked dehydrated. You could just tell from the bunny ear picture to the picture of him in the detention cell with Joaquin Castro that he was unwell, that he was in a place that was depriving him of his basic needs. And
Can
yeah,
I ask
sorry.
you, so for
Yeah,
no, thank you. For This is something that I think is really unique about physicians, and especially physicians like you and I who routinely every day we're taking care of kids, and that means that part of what we're doing is a physical exam. So like
exactly.
I cannot go out into the world and not notice if a child doesn't look like they're doing okay. Can you
Exactly.
can you tell us a little bit about the things about your that you were able to notice that maybe other people wouldn't have thought
Yeah, absolutely. And I always say this to like trainees, especially in the field of pediatrics and especially in the field of pediatric critical care, that really 90% of what you need to know about a patient, you can tell from looking at them from the door. You know, I can see right away what I was looking at what I saw in him. I saw that his color was poor. He looked pale. His lips looked like they didn't have, good color. So I thought he looked dehydrated. Um, he was clearly exhausted because he's 5 years old and he's completely asleep in this uncomfortable position in a fully lit room in the middle of the day. That's very unusual because 5-year-olds don't usually nap. Some of them do, but in general, it's not like a typical thing for a 5-year-old, and certainly not in like an uncomfortable position in a brightly lit room. So he's completely unconscious in a setting that would be, I would think, pretty stimulating. So he's clearly exhausted. Um, and then that was coupled with the history that was reported, which was that, he wasn't eating well, which is not surprising because the food there has been reported to have worms in it, and mold, and that they don't have any, fresh fruits or vegetables for kids. So knowing what the food is like, it wasn't surprising to hear that he wasn't eating. And then also with the history that he had had a fever and vomiting, I immediately thought, this kid is probably severely dehydrated, potentially also has an infection, and he needs to get the heck out of there. Like, what are they doing with this child?
Yeah, absolutely. So your doctor brain really kicked in.
My doctor brain kicked in and went into full blown, doctor panic mode, in addition to my mother brain that was like, this is just gut wrenching. But my doctor brain said, this kid needs medical attention. Why is he not getting medical attention? A child who isn't eating and who has a fever needs to go see a doctor. Why isn't he being brought to a doctor? And the more I looked into it and realized, what's going on with him and at this facility, the more I realized a lot of these children are suffering from medical neglect. They need medical care and they're not getting it. And this has been confirmed by multiple reports from families. There are public court filings documenting at least 300 medical concerns that have been reported by families that they're not getting seen by physicians, that their symptoms are being ignored, they're not getting their medications that they need. Um, and so there's a huge pattern that we're seeing of medical neglect in these facilities, which is just one of many other problems.
And for folks who, aren't aware, if a child like this came to your attention while you were providing clinical care and you found out, let's say this was not a child in detention, but a child who was living in a home, you would you would be concerned. You would be
Yeah,
like, what supports are missing for this child that this is what's happening?
absolutely. I what I like to tell people, like I've been asked before, what are the exact, things that you're worried about. What I try to tell people is here's a summary of what the conditions are like. This is all based on, published court filings and accounts from family members. Just picture a child that you know and love and imagine they're taken from their home, they're put in a detention cell that's essentially like a prison. They're out of their familiar environment. The food has mold and worms. This is reported by multiple people there. Um, the water is so poor that it makes them sick. Multiple people have reported they get stomach aches, they have diarrhea, rashes. So the water is undrinkable. And if they want clean water, they have to buy it through the commissary. They're not getting school. The lights are on 24/7, so they can't sleep. They've reported that the rooms smell like urine because the children often wet themselves out of stress. Children who are previously potty trained are wetting themselves. So you have these children in these horrific environments. There's multiple reports of children losing weight, which as a pediatrician, I know is not normal. Children are not supposed to lose weight. They're supposed to be growing. So if they're not gaining weight and they're losing weight, then they're being malnourished. So we have malnourishment, we have inability to sleep, we have this is essentially psychological and emotional abuse. Um, if you brought a child with that environment to me, that they're losing weight, they're wetting themselves, they're not getting enough nutrition, they're not able to sleep, I would absolutely recommend that they be removed from the home and I would contact CPS. And the only difference here is apparently CPS doesn't have jurisdiction over these children. And there's hundreds of them.
Well, thank you for that. I think the level of granularity is something that's oftentimes lost, right? When people are seeing, they're seeing the headlines in the news. They're
Right.
seeing like, oh, there's this detention facility and it's so terrible and like things are terrible. But I think that understanding the degree of specificity that you've just shared really brings home. I mean, no child, no human being should be forced to endure any of these things because not only are what all the things that you've just described, I actually was just jotting down notes to myself. Like, clearly, these things are abusive. It's torture. I mean, these are.
Correct. This is torture. It is medical neglect. It is emotional and psychological abuse and
And
torture.
physical abuse.
It is. I think we have to, I think you're right. I think we have to start talking about like not sanitizing the language around this, and not trying to sugarcoat it. This is child abuse. It is abusive to a child to deprive them of sleep. It is abusive to a child to deprive them of proper nutrition to the point that they are losing weight. This recent case that we had, the 2-year-old Caliph, he's a healthy, happy boy. He went into that detention center. He did not eat solid food for 12 days. And what the guards told the mom who asked for medical attention repeatedly is that she was told it was a mental problem. So we have a child who is not eating solid food for 12 days. The mom is rightfully concerned and requesting medical care, and she's being gaslit and told this is a mental issue. That's not a mental issue. That's like potentially a medical emergency that he was not eating for that long. That's the point in time, that, organs start to malfunction and shut down. You can't go that many days at that age without nutrition. And then he started having vomiting and a fever. And so I'm sure his immune system was affected by the stress of it all. And yeah, all of these cases, I think their individual stories are so important because they really do highlight the degree of horror. And they show this pattern, this similar pattern of they don't have good food. They don't have adequate food. They don't have nutrition. They don't have water. And the stress is making them sick. And they are not getting the appropriate medical attention. There's multiple cases that I document on my Instagram profile where I go through cases that I don't need to know more information to tell you that this is definitely medical neglect, and I think it's
Well,
important.
and I mean, the government is both causing these illnesses and then denying medical attention.
Exactly. Correct. Yes.
Um, Thank you. And so you ended up, being inspired by this situation. Your mom brain, your doctor brain. You're like, this is unacceptable. Like, we got to do something. It sounds like you were a physician who was, really focused on your clinical work and not necessarily doing this sort of outward facing advocacy. But then you got together with Doctors Anita Patel and Ashley Marie Cazzo, and you were like, we're going to do something. Can you tell us a little bit about how that came together?
Yes. This is, I can't even stress enough that this was such a turning point in my life. And it was one of those moments that just felt like we were all placed in this spot in time for a reason, because I can only describe this connection as kismet. Like it was very serendipitous and very organic, and it's morphed into something that truly has been life-changing. So there was the moment that I saw that photograph of Liam, and I saw it on Instagram, and it was posted by Dr. Cazzo. And the next day I went to work. I couldn't even think straight. I was so upset about it. I was so worried about him. And I completely broke down, actually. After I rounds, I went to my office and I cried. And I was just like, literally, I was like, I can't function with these feelings. I can't sit. The moral distress of being a pediatrician and seeing a child who needs help and then knowing that they're not getting help was overwhelming to me. Um, and my colleague gave me a hug, and my colleague Jackie, she's a nurse I work with. She's so wonderful. She said, I feel the same way. Let's turn these feelings into action. And so that was the beginning of Dr. Cazzo. I reached out to Dr. Cazzo that night. We started DMing each other, just kind of commiserating about how horrific this is. And we had the same kind of feeling that, like, really, it's as much for my own mental health to be active as a way to cope with how horrific it is when you really take this in. I mean, I'm basically grieving every day for these kids. And the only way to take action, the only way to really cope with it is to take action. So I started messaging with Dr. Cazzo. We put together our first draft, our first letter, which was a letter that we sent to ICE and members of Congress demanding Liam's release and medical attention for him. And we circulated that locally. We got a few dozen signatures and we sent that out. It did get a lot of public attention. Um, and then a few days later, Liam was released. And I'm not saying that it was because of us. I think it was just a coincidence that, like, that was the zeitgeist was all about, what was going on with Liam. He got released. And that was our first signal that, like, hey, this isn't like a hopeless situation. Like, speaking up does work. There was so much public outcry about that case. And then a few days later, he got released. So then we were so happy, but then we said, well, what about all these other kids? Now that we know this, we can't unknow it. And the more we knew, the worse it gets. I mean, every new stone we unturn it just keeps getting worse. So a turning point, another turning point was when we got Dr. Anita Patel. We saw that she has a really big following. She's got a really long history of advocacy. She's a phenomenal pediatric critical care doctor in DC, and we had started, like, DMing her and asking her to share things because we saw that she was also very passionate about this space. And um, a mutual friend also kind of connected us as well. And I was asking him, Dr. Alok Patel, to help me. I'm like, what else can we do? Because I'm truly don't know what I'm doing. I'm so new to all of this. How can we get this bigger? It needs to be bigger. We need to get these kids out. And he was like, you should talk to Dr. Anita Patel. And that cinched the trio of the three pediatricians. Once we got her on board, she was like, she really led the directive of, okay, let's get this formal letter to DHS demanding all of these children be released and laying out the bare minimum standards that they should adhere to while they're in detention. And that was the beginning of what this has evolved into, which is the three of us pediatricians, the journalist Lydia Terrazas, who's been reporting on the ground about all these families in Dilley, and then the connection to Casey Revkin, who's the director of the organization Each Step Home, that has been amazing at raising money to donate funds into the commissary accounts of these families so that they can, while they are detained, they can at least buy, like, water.
But what I wanted to draw attention to for folks who don't understand about the way that commissaries work in prisons,
Mhm.
and detention facilities are, of course, a type of prison,
Mhm.
is it costs an immense amount of money to buy anything. And there are
Yes.
all these private corporations that are funded, that make our prison industrial complex work. And so to even get water, it's not like you're getting the Costco deal. You know,
No,
as an incarcerated person, you're paying a much higher price.
correct. In fact, I had people ask, can we donate water? Can we donate Costco water? Specifically, they asked because we know Costco has a great deal. Um, and the answer
I
is
love
no.
a deal.
What?
We love a deal.
We love a deal. I was like, that's a great idea. And I asked Casey, can we donate water? No, you can't. You have to buy the core civic water. And you have to buy, it's like $30 for like a 12 pack of small water bottles just to have clean water.
Can you tell people what Core Civic is?
Oh, yes. I would love to tell people what Core Civic is. Core Civic is a publicly traded for-profit company that owns many detention facilities, and owns Dilley, runs Dilley. Majority shareholders are BlackRock and Vanguard, and they are basically profiting off of detaining families. And just so that everyone understands, the people who are in Dilley, none of them have committed any crimes. These are not criminals. These are not the worst of the worst. These are people with asylum cases. These are people who have committed no crimes. They have done everything they are supposed to do. Many of them were detained at their regular check-ins with ICE, that they were doing what they were supposed to do. And we have gotten to a point that we are quite literally commodifying child suffering. So Core Civic is the company that is making profit off of imprisoning children. And people should also be aware that their retirement money might be invested in these companies. And one of our, things that we are trying to educate the public about beyond just the horrors of the detention facility is the finances of this. And so, asking these companies to divest from Core Civic is one thing that we think is really important, because we shouldn't be a country that decides that it's okay to profit off of imprisoning children. That's just quite insane to even say out loud.
Living in a really special time.
Yeah. Yes.
Um,
Yes, we are.
you know, and I think just seeing the quiet part said out loud throughout the way, and specifically the way that children are being treated. And, you and I both know, as people who take care of little kids, is that, people are kinder to little kids generally. Usually, we think that children should be treated safely and should have a good home and should have education and should have an opportunity to grow up and not experience the toxic, terrible stress of incarceration.
Yeah.
Um, and it's certainly terrible to see the degree to which we did not learn
Yeah.
from the last time that we did this in the first Trump administration. And
Yep.
that's something that I have thought a lot about um, during this administration. Is I remember all those timelines, all those people talking about toxic stress, the negative impact on families from family separation, then to
Yep.
specific medical and psychological and emotional harms that are long lasting.
They are. Yeah.
The government's basically imposing ACEs, adverse childhood events, on these kids.
Exactly. Exactly. And this time we don't have um, any excuse, right? It's like the first time it happened. If you want to be extremely generous, you can say, we learned from that. And now we know, as if it wasn't already, obvious to me, it's common sense. If you put a kid in a cage and you take away their home and you separate them from their families, they're going to be a wreck. But let's just give the most general assumptions and say, oh, we had no idea it would be bad for them. Now we do. Now we have multiple studies of peer-reviewed medical literature, which, as we were writing our letter to DHS, we were, reading through these articles that we cited, and and I was reading many of them myself, to my own horror, to realize truly how bad it is and how well documented the harm is. This is not a mystery. This is not news. This is well published, documented literature specifically for children in detention. Up to 100% of kids who are detained have post traumatic stress syndrome symptoms. 50% of children develop depression and anxiety. Multiple children develop nutritional deficiencies, worsening of their chronic medical conditions, developmental regressions and delays. They have trouble in school. They have trouble with employment later in life. So we have learned a lot. It's published, it's out there. And so now we are in a stage where we are causing damage despite there being plenty of evidence to show that we know this is harming them. And we're also doing it at a record number. So another thing for people to be aware of, since the inauguration, an additional 6,000 children have ended up in detention. That's 1,000% increase since the inauguration. And so I want people to start putting the pieces together that we are putting children in cages at record numbers. They are trying to build more detention facilities across the country. And they are telling people that this immigration reform is about getting rid of the worst of the worst. But if you're really trying to get rid of people, then why wouldn't you just deport them? They're not deporting them, they're detaining them. And they're detaining them in these facilities that are run by these for-profit companies, which, by the way, these for-profit companies like CoreCivic are making campaign donations to
I can
members.
only guess which campaigns they're donating to.
So yeah, that whole circle, I think, is really important for people to understand. There's the message that the administration is sending out that this is all about, oh, you broke the law, so you got to go. But these people have not broken the law. They are children.
We're talking about children.
First of all, we're talking about children. Even if you don't want to even get into the parents, but the parents haven't broken the law either. But regardless, if you just focus on the children have not broken the law. They're being imprisoned. If you wanted to get rid of them, you would just deport them. You're not deporting them. You want to lock them up in cages because you're making money. You are cashing in on putting children in cages. And that's what's happening. And they want to do it. They want to build more. Just lovely, isn't it? Like I said, it just keeps getting worse. The more we talk about it, the more we learn, the worse it gets, honestly.
Well, and this is also, and you're really beautifully drawing these connections because, for folks like myself who are very committed to abolition and understanding that is there are a lot of things that need to be undone in this country to be able to treat each other with dignity and respect and as full human beings. And what you're really showing is how xenophobia is tied to the prison industrial complex.
Yep.
Racism is tied to the prison industrial complex.
Yeah.
The fact that who it is that gets jailed.
Yeah.
It's pretty specific right now.
Right. Exactly.
And certainly, if this was what was happening to, I don't know, a famous person's child, we would be having a very different conversation.
Correct. Yes, this is very clearly a mission by a group of people that has decided that they don't want a certain type of people in this country, or that, well, clearly, they can be in the country, but they'd rather throw them in a cage and make some money off of that. This is, and it goes perfectly in line with the, Supreme Court ruling that essentially took away, essentially made it legal to racially profile. ICE people have asked, like, well, how do they justify, all of these arrests? They don't have to. They don't have to anymore. They don't have to justify it. And so they are able.
Have a brief interaction with law enforcement.
Yeah.
Just terrible.
Yeah. Yes. And there's been, and I've heard firsthand reports too from family members that I've spoken to who were previously detained, and then also read about some in the court filings, where they say that they blatantly make racist remarks to them all the time. So, like, for example, one mother I spoke to who was detained with her family and her two young boys, one was 5 and one was 11. Her 5-year-old had a kidney disease, and she was regularly asking if he could get fresh water and fruit to maintain hydration, which is the most important thing for him. And she was denied that. They say that if you have a doctor's note, you can get water, but she asked for it multiple times, and they never even brought a doctor to see him.
Can we pause?
Yeah.
I have never, and I've written plenty of doctor's notes. I've never had to write a doctor's note to be like, you should be allowed to have access to water.
Correct. That's insane. That's a given for survival. And by the way, I'm pretty sure prisons have better standards than these detention centers, because I'm pretty sure if you are in a federal prison that there are requirements for nutrition, clean air, water. They have standards that need to be adhered to. I don't think there are any of those standards here. It's just like seems like a free for all, where
Well, it's funny
they
how many of these they operate outside of the bounds of the law because they're technically not prisons because no
correct,
one's
exactly,
technically been
right,
convicted of a crime.
right. So there's all these loopholes that actually make it worse than a prison because they don't even have to adhere to the basic human standards of what a prison is required to do. But the point I wanted to make about that family was that the mom said that they made racist remarks to them all the time, calling them, spics and whatnot. And the court filings have also said multiple times the guards, call them. And Joaquin Castro recently reported on that as well. They call them wetbacks and spics. And so there's very obviously racism that is just out in the open and very much a part of this inhumane treatment of these poor people. And it's just makes my stomach turn.
Well, let's so you and your colleagues had put together this letter. You'd sent it to Christy Noam. You're like, listen, I mean, she's out of a job now, but
Yeah.
whatever. Mark Wayne can read it, I guess. Um, and you've had some wins. Um, I know there have also been some setbacks.
Absolutely.
Do you want to talk a little bit about some things that you and your colleagues have learned through this process about advocating as effectively as possible for these families?
Yes, definitely. So we, um, you know, especially myself, very new to this process. We've learned a lot of things. One thing we've learned is, and I think the most important thing is that speaking up really does make a difference. And so the transition from the initial sort of feeling of paralysis and helplessness that was overwhelming in the beginning has really been overcome by knowing that when you take action, um, there can be victories. And so we've had a couple victories. And then let me just tell you about some of the cases just as examples, because I think the cases themselves kind of highlight that process. There was the 2-month-old baby boy that's pretty famous, Juan Nicolas, who was detained there. And he was in significant respiratory distress. He was vomiting. He had all of these symptoms that we were all sounding the alarm online saying he needs medical attention. This is a medical emergency. And there was a lot of public attention on that case, rightfully so. People were outraged. Um, and we put a lot of pressure on lawmakers and the facility themselves to release this baby. Finally, he went to a hospital days after being ignored, um, which in and of itself is just, again, another case of blatant medical neglect because a 2-month-old who's having difficulty breathing and vomiting is automatically a hospital admission. That's not a kid that you watch at home. Um, and then after he was unresponsive, 2 days after being in a condition that we were saying needs hospitalization, he was finally rushed to the hospital. He was kept there for a very short amount of time, which is also highly suspicious to me and really makes me question what the care is like at these local hospitals that Core Civic is sending these kids to, because we would automatically observe a kid at least 24 to 48 hours for something like that, an episode of unresponsiveness at that age. And he was discharged in like less than 12 hours. And then he was deported. His mother was quite literally abandoned at the border with her sick infant and nothing but the clothes on her back and the tiny amount of money that was in her commissary account. Um, and so one lesson that we learned from that case was I really do believe they are retaliatory. There's been, I think that the combination of the public pressure and his medical condition made it easier for them to just deport him. And so, we've,
And did not deport him to a facility where he could complete his care, for example. I mean,
Correct. They quite literally left them at the border. She had
yeah,
no phone. She had nobody with her. The only reason she was able to be even like safely end up in a safe destination. By the way, they deported her. They left her at the same border where the same region that she had just fled from for her safety. Um, it was just because a stranger on the street, she asked a stranger on the street to borrow their phone, and she had Lydia Terrasa's number memorized, the journalist from Univision who's been covering these cases. And she called Lydia, and Lydia was able to come and find her. And then we were able to stay in touch with them and raise money through a GoFundMe. And then each step home also stepped in and were able to get them flights and hotel for the first couple of nights so that they could have a place to sleep. Um, so really it's because of, each step home and Lydia, that they were able to like have a safe, this poor young mother was able to have find a place to sleep that night. So one, that was a major, on the plus side, it was proof that, these cases are proof that, speaking up does make an impact. But one negative is that we have seen many instances where there seems to be retaliation. Other examples are when Miss Rachel got involved and did a video call.
and for people who
Yeah,
are
sorry.
in the toddler
Yes.
sphere, can you explain who Miss Rachel is?
Yes. So Miss Rachel is this absolutely wonderful human being. She is an educator. She does videos on YouTube where she basically teaches young babies and toddlers language. And she is also an advocate for children everywhere. She was very vocal about supporting, children in Gaza who suffered horrific abuse and injuries. And so she is just, I think, one of the greatest human beings in our generation, to be quite honest. She's just like an angel. And we're so happy that she, has decided to help us amplify these stories. Um, and what we've seen is like that after this call with Miss Rachel and after other calls as well with Lydia, where they get on a video call with a family or a kid, and they let the kids tell their stories. And the public understandably becomes outraged, and they reach out and they demand release. What we've heard directly from the families is that after these cases, the guards, so after one particular case, after Miss Rachel, they shut down the video calls. They basically said no more video calls.
Yeah.
And after
Well, similar, yeah, the ProPublica thing where they got out all.
ProPublica thing, yeah, where they brought out all the drawings, they published the drawings of the children saying like, we hate it here, let us out. The guards went in and started ripping up their drawings. So, um,
Wait,
yes,
I
yeah.
just I
I know. I like so actually what's happening is you have grown adult humans that are bullying children. I mean, that's bullying. You're going into imagine being an adult, going into a child's room and saying, "I'm going to rip up your artwork because I don't like what you said." On the positive side, I'm sorry, what?
was gonna say Miss Rachel. Thank you.
Thank you, Miss Rachel. Miss Rachel deserves all the awards. Thank Thank goodness for her, honestly. We were just like absolutely over the moon when we finally, were able to get her attention on these kids. And as soon as she learned about it, she was, we watched her go through the same kind of grief and shock that we went through of like, oh my gosh, what are you kidding me? What do you mean these children are being treated this way? What do you mean they don't have nutrition? What do you mean they're not eating? What do you mean? We started talking to her about this 5-year-old Gael, this nonverbal autistic boy who needed a special diet and wasn't getting it. And he didn't poop for 10, 11 days and his belly was swollen. We saw pictures from the video calls that mom shared with Lydia Terrazas. He had a
You and
belly.
I both know that's an emergency.
It's emergency. He could have an obstruction. He could have something really bad. And so that was the first case that she, heard about and started. So she started amplifying that story. And then the next case, pretty short after that, was this little boy diver that sweet little genius little boy who's a spelling bee champion who is sitting in a detention cell and worried about missing his spelling bee championship. He had been invited to go to regionals for his spelling bee. And so Miss Rachel um, amplified his story, and it was ended up being on NBC News and featured. And she, one of the famous quotes was, "I'm trying to get a kid out of jail so that he can go to a spelling bee." What an absurd sentence to say out loud, right? Um, and but because of her, you know, her advocacy, and because of this kind of system that we've formed that includes telling these stories through Lydia Terrazas, this amazing journalist, being on the ground, talking to these families, learning their names, learning their stories, learning what their complaints and their sufferings are, sharing those stories online with great voices, with large audiences like Miss Rachel, and then connecting them with attorneys to represent them led to, we had these victories. We got Gael released, Diver released, and most recently, Kayla, the 2-year-old who didn't eat for 12 days. So on the plus side, what we're learning is that this advocacy, it does work, and we're not going to get all of our goals overnight. We're not going to get everything we want all at once, but what I want people to really understand is, if you're feeling like how I felt, which is like, I feel so helpless. This is so horrible. I'm overwhelmed with grief. I don't know what to do. I feel paralyzed. There actually are things that you can do. And even the smallest thing, when we all do them, they add up to things. This all started with us just doing like one little thing, sending one message, posting one post, sending one DM, one email, one letter. Suddenly we have 3 kids out. And so I hope we get all of these kids out eventually. So that's the little glimmer of hope that I am holding on to get me through the day, that this isn't a hopeless cause, and we just absolutely cannot stop fighting for these children who can't fight for themselves.
This is the perfect moral distress, moral injury thing, is that that sense of helplessness is the manifestation of that feeling of moral distress. And it is by doing something that you can say, well, I'm not going to be stuck in this helplessness. And I think for anybody who says, oh, but I'm just one person,
Yeah.
you're just one person.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just one person. I'm just one mom who was sick to her stomach, crying in her office, saying, I absolutely can't stand this at all. What do I do? I didn't know what to do. And I still am learning every day. Um, but every one of those little actions, it does amount to a lot. We have accomplished a lot already, and we're just getting started. And I just really want people to know that, and that it also just helps. It helps me feel better. Like I said, these children are helping me as much as we're trying to help them, because staying busy and committing to these actions is the only way that I can like cope and function, because I otherwise just fell apart.
And the other thing I hear in your story is, I mean, you and I both know, like, we're currently living in a country that despises care, that despises and says that, well, if you care about people, you're weak.
Mm,
If you cry, you're weak. Whatever. All of this nonsense and it's all being amplified in this manosphere,
mhm.
whatever, and in the toxicity coming from within the government. And our care for other human beings is our greatest strength. And I think,
Absolutely.
your story of being like, what was the nurse who
Jackie.
Jackie. I
Jackie.
mean, Jackie,
That
thank you.
moment. Jackie, literally, I mean, if you really wanna pin it down to, like, what was the true, like, spark, it was Jackie. I was just sobbing. I was completely useless, sobbing in my office like a crazy person. I could not function. I didn't sleep the
This
night
is
before.
also this is the normal reaction to
Yes.
being exposed to human suffering.
Correct. Yes.
I mean, as doctors, we suppress that all the
Oh,
time.
yeah. And I suppressed it all through rounds. I did my rounds. I saw my patients. I talked to my families. And then I went to my office and I completely, the floodgates opened. And Jackie was the same way. She was also in tears. She's also a mother. We were just both sick, and she was the one. And I will never forget that moment and those words that she said. We have to turn these feelings into action. And that was it.
Jackie's brilliant.
Thank you so much, Jackie. I love her. I adore her.
Amazing.
We can all be Jackie, can all take these feelings. Really, everyone can take all of these feelings about, because, like, this is all by design, this overwhelm of the news cycle, of every day being something more unprecedented, more overwhelming, more horrific. The idea, I mean, this is by design to make everyone paralyzed, to make everyone try to dissociate and tune out and think, well, I can't do anything. I'm just one person. But we can all do small things. And whatever it is that your talent is or your passion is, you can do like small things that really do make a difference. And we all have to do that. And we all have to keep doing it because no one's coming to save us. We have to save ourselves in this. That's something I've realized. There's no, you know, you know, politician who's going to come from the heavens and make everything right again. Like, it's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. It's not from anywhere. No one's coming from the heavens to descend upon us and fix everything. We have to fix everything. We have to do the work.
I was I was just thinking about that terrible
The
AI
heavens.
generated
I
meme
know. Oh, God.
you put out where he's,
Gosh.
"I'm not being Jesus, I'm a doctor."
What in the weird,
We're in a weird timeline.
this is like the weirdest timeline ever. Yes.
Um, so I think this is the perfect transition is w what are things that, that our listeners can take away from this conversation? What are things that they can do, actions for them to turn that helplessness into something better, something good?
Yes. Thank you so much for that. So, Um, if you guys want to follow our journey, and you want to help, you can follow all of us on Instagram, Ask La Doctora, Anita K. Patel, MD, and Dr. Ashmarie. And you will see that we all have linked in our bios. The Chili website, where you can click on that, and we have a list of action items for different topics that you can, if you want to participate in. For example, we have our petition that you can sign that demands the closure of the Dilley detention facility that we put together with Miss Rachel. We have over 200,000 signatures. And a lot of people say, like, oh, petitions don't really do much. But when they get to those numbers, like the type of numbers that we've garnered, like they can definitely go places. So there's that petition. Calling your Congress members. That actually makes a huge difference. And it only takes a couple of minutes. If you don't know who your representatives are, you can go to congress.gov/find your representative. You just type in your zip code and it'll tell you. And you can just call the main switchboard and call them. And we also have a resist bot text. You can just
Mhm.
send a
Ugh,
text.
I love resist
Those are
bot.
my favorite because I'm like I'm just texting all the time. Like, it's so easy. You can text go ESH to 50409, and that will automatically write a letter to your Congress members telling them to end child detention. And then another thing that you can do is you can donate to Each Step Home. This organization is the organization that we've been working very closely with. There is a fund specifically for the commissary accounts of the families who are currently detained so that while they're in detention, they can at least have basic things like clean water, hygiene products, snacks for their kids. One mom bought her son a chocolate bar from the money from Each Step Home for his birthday because he had his third birthday in Dilley Detention Facility and she wanted to do something for him. So, to make their experience there a little bit less hellish, you can donate to Each Step Home. Um, and we have an advocacy page, anitakpatelmd.com/advocacy, and all of those action items are on there. So just to summarize, the Chili link has all action items, pre-written emails. You just click, click, click. It's super
And
quick.
it's I'm looking at it now while we're talking, and it's, like,
It's
so
super,
easy. so organized,
Yeah.
so easy to see.
Yeah, you just click on and you don't have to, like, download an app, you don't have to register. You can, but it's totally optional, so for people who are like me, who are like, "Oh my gosh, I don't want another app and another password," you don't have to do that. You can just go to the link and you can see, there's pre-written emails that you can send that say, for example, "Vanguard, I want you to divest my retirement." Um from Core Civic. And those are the types of actions that, again, if multiple people do it, it has been successful in the past. There have been other companies that where people collectively demanded divestment. These companies listen. So we have those action items. We have pre-written emails to different members of Congress for different issues. So go to the Chili link, text "Go ESH" to 50409, follow our advocacy page, and just call your reps and your Congress members every day. I just call them now regularly.
You're just like speed dial.
Yeah, just got them on speed dial. Uh,
Dr. Jones, thank you so much. I mean, not only for all of the incredible advocacy, the work that you've been doing and are continuing to do, but for that incredible list of things that people everywhere can do. That, it's not each one person can make a difference. And I think that's just something that I think many of us really need to hear on a regular basis because you're right, the overwhelm can be so intense. Um, and so I think that that's probably the perfect time. I'm hoping that you don't mind when Arghavan's here, every week we do something called Take Two and Call Me in the Morning, which is an excuse for us to be like, what has given us joy this week? Because we knew that every week we were going to need an excuse to find something good in this hellscape. So I wonder what are you doing these days that brings you joy? What might you prescribe, for example, to your fellow humans?
my greatest joy is to go with my little boy. I have a 2-year-old son, take him outside and go on a little nature walk and just turn my phone on Do Not Disturb and check out from all of it, and get some fresh air and some sunlight and just watch him explore and point out the bugs and the sticks and the grass and whatever he sees and just try to be present and enjoy those little moments, with him. So I think that's really important. Essentially, touch grass, right? Get some fresh air, some sunlight, touching grass. It's really important. It's really
Yeah.
important just to tune out all the noise and be present at least once a day. I think that's really helped keep me, um, somewhat sane in
When
all this.
toddlers for all of the shade that
They get
toddlers
so
get.
much shade. They're so great. They're so fun. They
Yeah,
get so
I
much
mean,
shade.
it's intermittently they're fun and they're, really challenging, but I feel like when you go out on a walk with a toddler, they don't care what's on your phone and also like, look at this and
No,
look at
it's
what I'm doing. And it doesn't matter how banal something might be to you, they are just fascinated.
I know, I love it. I love, like, re-experiencing the world through his eyes, where he's just like, "Look at this little ladybug." I'm like, "You know what? That is fantastic. Look at her. Look at her go. That is great. We should appreciate ladybugs. You're right."
I love that. Um, my eldest kid insisted that we get scuba certified, which is, by the way, not something that I would have ever done for myself. Um,
So badass.
I mean, I'll do anything for my kids, and
Yeah.
so they wanted me to get scuba certified. So we've been able to do a bunch of diving together. And last week was spring break in our community, and we went to Catalina Island, and my eldest and I got to go scuba diving, and we saw this is like the underwater equivalent, like touch seagrass, I guess.
Yeah, I
Uh,
love it. Touch
and I
kelp.
and I got to see. I mean, Catalina has incredible diving, and so there's a ton of really cool, weird fish we got to see, and it was very neat.
So cool.
And I could not believe it. The guide, this place, it's called Catalina Scuba for anybody who wants to go there. Our
Yeah.
guide was named Chris. Him and his wife own this business. They're fabulous. I will put a link in the show notes.
Yes,
And
please. I
he
actually
took us on our second dive to see a giant sea bass,
oh my god.
which I guess they're just now starting to come back to Catalina area for their making babies and whatnot.
Oh my gosh.
Um, they're ginormous.
How big are they? I actually have no idea.
They apparently get to be like 500 pounds.
Oh my
And
gosh.
when he was talking to us between our dives, he was like, "Oh, I don't know if we're gonna be able to find one, but like it would be really cool if we did, so let's go look." And he's like, "So if I tell you that something's really big, just please don't move really suddenly. And we're just gonna like give it plenty of space and whatever." And I could not believe, like, I knew it was gonna be big, but then when we found one, and it was like nestled in a bunch of giant sea kelp that grows here in
Wow.
California, and it was just wild, and it was so cool, and
Incredible.
I've been holding that moment in my heart, like, what a special, I mean, such a luxury to be able to go do stuff like that with my family,
Yes.
and to get to see these things in nature, and, like, you don't have your phone when you're down
Right.
there.
Exactly.
There's no news, there's no
Right.
notifications.
Yep. Just be present, being present in that moment, soaking it in. That sounds incredible. I
Yeah,
love that.
it was really cool.
Wow.
Well, I'm so, so grateful to you for being on the show this week.
Thank you so much for inviting me. This is such an honor to be with this attending that I looked up to as a trainee to be on your podcast. I just feel like completely honored and thrilled. This is so, so wonderful, and I'm so grateful. Thank you.
Feeling is it is a mutual admiration society.
Oh,
All right. Well, listen, folks, that's it for this week's episode. If you don't like what you heard, this has been some terrible podcast, but we know that you're listening to things on the manosphere. I know that our audience has great taste. And so if you've made it this far, thanks for staying with us. Make sure to follow us on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. We're at The Present Illness for all of our TPI related news. And we'll be back next week with more headlines, hot takes, and doom scrolling, hopefully wrapped up in some laughs. So until then, agitate, hydrate, and take a nap. And we'll see you next time on The Present Illness. Production by Arghavan, Salles and Alyssa Burgart. Editing by Alyssa Burgart. Social media by Arghavan, Salles. Original music by Joseph Uphoff. Don't take medical advice from random people on a podcast. This show's for informational purposes. It's meant to be fun, and it's certainly not medical advice. Please take your medical questions to a qualified professional.